"You're not worthy of him." That's what she said to me at the dinner table on a Sunday afternoon, with his entire family sitting right there, watching, waiting to see what I would do. I didn't cry. I didn't stand up and make a scene. I just sat there with my hands folded in my lap, feeling the blood rush to my face, and I smiled. Not because I thought it was funny, not because I was okay with it. I smiled because I had learned, after 2 years of living under that woman's shadow, that showing her she had gotten to me was the one thing I would never give her again. My name is Maya. I'm 29 years old. I'm a light-skinned Black woman who grew up in Atlanta, moved to Cincinnati after college, and married the most patient, steady man I have ever known. His name is Daniel. He's kind and hardworking, and he loves me in a way that still catches me off guard sometimes. We met at a work conference, dated for a year and a half, got engaged at a little restaurant near the river, and got married on a Saturday in October with leaves on the ground and his grandmother crying in the front row. It was the happiest day of my life. And then there was his mother. Her name is Patricia. And from the very first day Daniel brought me home to meet her, I knew. You know how sometimes you meet someone and something just feels off? Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet kind of cold that doesn't match their smile. That was Patricia from day one. She hugged me like she was doing me a favor. She complimented my dress and then immediately said it was interesting that I chose something so bold. She asked where I was from, and when I said Atlanta, she nodded slowly, like that explained something she had already suspected. Daniel didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't know what to do with it yet. Either way, I told myself I was overthinking it. I told myself every new mother-in-law is a little guarded at first. I told myself that if I was patient and warm and respectful, she would eventually come around. I really believed that. I held on to that belief a lot longer than I should have. Before I keep going, if you're new here and you've ever dealt with a situation where someone in your partner's family made you feel like you didn't belong, you are going to want to hear how this story ends. Subscribe to this channel right now and make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss part 2, because that's where everything changes. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because what happened at that Sunday dinner did not come out of nowhere. It was the result of 2 years of small moments that nobody else seemed to see. It started with the visits. Patricia lived about 40 minutes away from us, which sounds like a reasonable distance, but somehow she was at our house almost every weekend. Sometimes she would call ahead. A lot of the time she wouldn't. She had a key that Daniel had given her before we got married, back when he was still living alone, and after the wedding she just kept using it like nothing had changed. I would come downstairs on a Saturday morning in my own home and find her sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee she had made herself, going through the mail on the counter. The first time it happened, I was so caught off guard I didn't even say anything. I just stood there in my robe, stared at her, said good morning, and went back upstairs to change. When I came back down, she was reorganizing my cabinets. She looked up at me like it was the most natural thing in the world and said, "I hope you don't mind." Daniel always kept his pots on the lower shelf. I minded, but I said nothing. The second time she let herself in without warning, I was on a work call in the home office. I heard the front door, heard her moving around in the kitchen, heard her turn on the television. I had to mute myself twice because the sound was leaking through the walls. When I finished my call and came out, she looked at me and said, "Oh, you work from home? Daniel didn't mention that," like I was the guest. I told Daniel that night that we needed to talk about the key situation. He listened. He nodded. He said he understood and that he would handle it. The next weekend, she let herself in again. When I asked him what happened, he said he hadn't wanted to hurt her feelings and that it would cause a whole thing. I asked him what he thought it was causing me. He apologized. He said he would talk to her. He didn't. This is the part of the story that I think a lot of women understand and that nobody likes to say out loud. It wasn't just Patricia. It was also the space between what Daniel said and what Daniel did. He loved me. I never doubted that. But there is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being with someone who sees what's happening to you and still chooses the path of least resistance every single time. Because dealing with his mother felt harder to him than watching me deal with it alone. I carried that exhaustion quietly. I didn't want to be the wife who was always fighting with her mother-in-law. I didn't want that to be my identity in this marriage. So I swallowed a lot of things. Patricia had opinions about my cooking. Not loud ones, not mean ones, just the kind that sneak under the door. She would take a bite of something I made and say, this is interesting. Daniel usually likes things a little less seasoned. She would bring her own dishes to family dinners without being asked, and then make sure to mention what was in them and how long they had taken to make. She would ask me what I did for work with this look on her face, like she already knew the answer wasn't good enough, Even though I ran my own marketing consultancy and had more clients than I knew what to do with, she had opinions about my appearance too. She once asked me right in front of Daniel's sister why I kept my hair natural. She said it with this look of polite concern, like she was worried about me. I told her I liked my hair this way. She said, of course, it's just that Daniel always dated girls with more traditional styles. I looked at Daniel. He looked at the floor. I want to be clear about something. Not every single moment was awful. There were times when Patricia was warm and funny and easy to be around. There were Sunday dinners that went perfectly fine. Conversations about nothing in particular. Moments where I could almost see the version of her that might have accepted me in a different world. That's actually what made it so disorienting. When someone is horrible all the time, you know where you stand. When someone alternates between cold and kind, you start questioning your own perception. You start thinking maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe you're reading into things. Maybe you just need to try harder. I tried harder for 2 years. And then came that Sunday in March. It was a regular family lunch at Patricia's house. Daniel's sister Renee was there with her husband. His cousin Marcus was there with his girlfriend. His Aunt Carol, who I actually liked, was there too. It was a full house, loud in that comfortable way big families get when everyone is talking at once. I had spent the whole morning making a sweet potato casserole from scratch because I wanted to bring something, because I always wanted to show up prepared, because I was always trying to earn my place at that table even though it was supposed to already be mine. We sat down to eat, and for a while everything was fine. The food was good. The conversation was easy. Daniel had his hand on my knee under the table, and I was actually starting to relax. And then Patricia, from the other end of the table, said something to her sister about a woman at her church who had married someone, quote-unquote, out of her league. I didn't think it was directed at me at first. I just kept eating. Then she looked right at me and said, "Some women just don't understand that love isn't enough if you don't bring the right things to the table." The table got a little quieter. I looked at my plate. She kept going. She said that Daniel had always had a certain kind of future ahead of him. She said that his father, God rest his soul, had always imagined him with someone who matched his potential. She said all of this in this calm, measured voice, like she was just making conversation, like she was just sharing her thoughts on life in general. And then she looked at me one more time and said it, clearly, directly, with her chin up and her hands folded and everyone listening. "You're not worthy of him, Maya. I've thought it from the beginning, and I think it's time someone said it." The table went completely silent. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Not because I believed her, but because she had just said out loud, in front of everyone who was supposed to be my family now, the exact thing she had been implying for 2 years. All those little comments, all those sideways looks, all those moments of cold politeness, they had all been leading to this one sentence said at a table full of people who were now staring at their plates. And then Daniel stood up. I didn't expect that. I had stopped expecting Daniel to stand up. I had accepted that he loved me, but that his mother would always be the line he wouldn't cross. I had made peace with it in the way you make peace with things that still hurt you, which is to say I hadn't really made peace with it at all. But he stood up. He set down his fork. He pushed his chair back. He looked at his mother at the other end of the table and he said, in a voice I had never heard from him before, low and steady and completely certain, "The worthy one at this table is her. You owe her an apology." Patricia blinked, like she couldn't quite process what she was hearing. He said it again, "Apologize to my wife." Nobody moved. Renee's husband was staring at his glass. Marcus had his eyes down. Aunt Carol had her hands in her lap and I could see her trying to decide what to do with her face. Patricia said, "Daniel, I am your mother." He said, "I know who you are, and Maya is my wife, and you don't get to speak to her that way at your table or any other table. Not anymore." She started to say something about how she was only speaking the truth, about how she had given her whole life to raising him and she just wanted the best for him, about how I should understand that she was coming from a place of love. And Daniel looked at her and said, "This isn't love, this is control, and I'm done pretending I don't see it." The silence after that was enormous. I have never heard a room that quiet in my life. I sat very still. I had tears on my face and I hadn't even felt them come. Not from sadness, not from being broken, from something closer to relief. From the feeling of 2 years of being small in a room full of people finally ending. Patricia stood up and left the table. We heard her in the kitchen. Nobody spoke for what felt like a very long time. Aunt Carol was the first one to say anything. She reached across the table and put her hand on top of mine and said, "Good for him." Just that. 3 words. But I felt them in my chest. We left shortly after. The drive home was quiet in a different way, a heavy but honest kind of quiet. When we got inside, Daniel sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. He said, "Maya, I'm sorry. I should have said that a long time ago." I sat down next to him. I didn't say it was fine, because it hadn't been. I didn't say it didn't matter, because it had. I said, "Thank you for saying it today." He nodded. He reached over and held my hand, and we just sat there for a while in our quiet living room with the evening light coming through the windows. And that was the beginning of something changing. Patricia did not call for 3 weeks after that dinner. 3 full weeks of silence. I won't pretend I didn't notice it or that part of me wasn't relieved by it. I had spent so much energy managing her presence that the absence of it felt like putting down a weight I hadn't known I was carrying every single day. When she finally called, she didn't call me. She called Daniel. He came and found me afterward and told me what she had said. She told him she had been upset and that she had spoken in the heat of the moment. She said she hoped things could go back to normal. She did not say she was sorry. Daniel told her that things going back to normal wasn't an option. He told her that if she wanted to be part of our lives going forward, an apology to me was not optional. He told her that how she treated his wife was a direct reflection of how she felt about him and the life he had chosen, and that he needed her to understand that. She told him he was being dramatic. He told her to take some time to think about it. She hung up. I heard all of this secondhand because I had been in the next room trying to focus on a client project. When Daniel finished telling me, I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "How do you feel?" He said, "Sad, but clear." I understood that completely. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from finally seeing someone you love the way they actually are, instead of the way you need them to be. It doesn't make you stop loving them. It just makes you stop pretending. 2 weeks after that phone call, Patricia showed up at our door, unannounced, which, given everything, was not exactly the confidence-building opening move. I was home alone when I heard the knock. I went to the door, and there she was, standing on the porch in her coat, holding a foil-covered dish. She said, "I made Daniel's favorite. I thought maybe we could talk." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "He's not home right now." She said, "Maybe I could come in and wait." And I said, calmly and clearly, without any anger in my voice at all, "Patricia, I think what would be better is if you came back when Daniel is here. And if you want to come inside this house, I'd appreciate a call first. That goes for any day going forward." She looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language. I said, "That's not a punishment. That's just how things are going to work from now on." She stood there for another moment. She looked down at the dish in her hands. She looked back up at me. And then she said very quietly, "I suppose I haven't been fair to you." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't everything I deserved to hear. But it was the first honest thing she had ever said directly to me, and I recognized it for what it was. I said, "I think we both know that. And I think we can figure out a way to move forward if we're both willing to be honest." She nodded. She left with the dish. She called Daniel that evening and told him she needed to apologize to me properly, and asked if they could all have dinner together soon. Daniel came and found me in the kitchen and told me. He was watching my face to see what I thought. I thought about 2 years of swallowed comments and early mornings in my own kitchen feeling like a guest, and sitting at a table being told I wasn't enough in front of people who said nothing. Then I thought about Daniel standing up. I said, "Tell her yes, but things will be different now." He said, "Different how?" I said, "Different the way they need to be. She'll understand when she sees it." He smiled a little. He said, "You're not going to make this easy on her, are you?" I said, "I'm going to be exactly as kind as she is willing to be. Not one bit more, and not one bit less." That dinner happened about a month later. It was quieter than the usual gatherings, more careful. Patricia brought the casserole and set it on the table, and before anyone sat down, she looked at me and said, in front of Daniel and Renee and her own sister, who happened to be visiting, "Maya, I owe you an apology. I was unkind, I was unfair, and I'm sorry." It wasn't a performance. Her voice was plain and even, and she held eye contact while she said it. I said, "Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that." We sat down and had dinner. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was honest. And honest felt like more than enough to start with. That was 4 months ago. Things are not perfect. They won't be for a long time, and maybe they'll never be in the way I once imagined. There are still moments when I catch something in Patricia's expression that I recognize, a flash of old resistance, a trace of the thing she hasn't fully let go of yet. But she knocks now. She calls first. She has not made a comment about my hair or my cooking or what I bring to the table since that March afternoon. And Daniel, my patient steady Daniel, is still figuring out how to hold both of these things at once, how to be a good son and a present husband without disappearing into the space between them. It's a process. We talk about it more now than we ever did before. That part has gotten better. What I want to say to you, if you've made it this far, is this. Not every story like this one has a dramatic turning point. Not every partner stands up the way Daniel did. Not every mother-in-law backs down. I know that. I know my story could have gone very differently, and I know that for some of you it has. But here is the thing I carry with me now. On that Sunday in March, sitting at that table with tears on my face and silence pressing in from every direction, I did not break. I did not beg. I did not explain myself or defend myself or shrink into something smaller to make the moment easier for everyone else. I sat still and I let the truth be what it was. And it turned out the truth was already doing the work, already moving underneath the surface, already preparing the ground for something to shift. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay exactly who you are and let other people run out of room to pretend otherwise. If this story reached you somewhere real, if you've ever sat at someone's table and felt like you were being quietly told you didn't belong there, I want you to know that feeling has a name and it is not your fault, and you are not alone in it. Leave a comment and tell me your experience. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time because next week I have something coming that I think a lot of you are going to need to hear. 4 months after that dinner, Patricia called me directly for the first time ever. Not Daniel, me. I almost didn't recognize the number. She said she wanted to meet for coffee, just the two of us. No Daniel, no family, no buffer. I sat with that for a moment before I answered, then I said yes. We met at a small place near her neighborhood on a Wednesday morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting with her hands around a mug, looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Just smaller in the way people look when they've put something down that they were carrying for a long time. She didn't waste time. She said, "I treated you like a threat when you were just a woman who loved my son. I think I knew that even while I was doing it. I just wasn't ready to stop." I didn't say anything right away. I let her words sit on the table between us. Then I said, "Why are you ready now?" She looked out the window for a second. She said, "Because I almost lost him. And because I watched you sit at that table and not fall apart, and I thought, that is exactly the kind of woman he needs. And I had been calling it the wrong thing for 2 years." I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. Not all the way. But something close to understanding. The kind that doesn't erase what happened, but makes it possible to move forward without dragging all of it behind you. I said, "I don't need us to be best friends, Patricia. I just need us to be honest." She nodded. She said, "I can do honest." We sat there for another hour. We talked about Daniel as a kid, about her husband who passed, about small things that had nothing to do with any of the hard stuff. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of quiet that still felt a little fragile, but it was real. And real was more than I had ever expected to get from her. When we said goodbye outside, she hugged me. A real one this time. Not the kind she used to give me that felt like a performance. The kind that means something. I drove home and sat in the car in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. Daniel was in the kitchen when I walked in. He looked at my face and said, "How did it go?" I said, "It was a start." He smiled. He said, "That's everything." And honestly, standing there in my own kitchen, in my own home, with my husband looking at me like that, I thought, yes, it is. If someone in your life has ever made you feel like you had to earn your place somewhere you already belonged, I want you to hear this. You don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself. Not at their table, not in their family, not anywhere. Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. There's more coming and you don't want to miss it.